Hey, Philomena.
Hi, Leah.
Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Whatever I can do.
Yeah. Well, so earlier we were talking about the pandemic and what's going on with the schools. And I know you have a 15-year-old, I have a 14-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a 29-year-old. So, uh, I don't know what's going to happen, but my guess is the first 5 weeks, as they say, will be online, and then I think it'll continue. But
Yeah,
what do you
yeah.
think? How are you all handling that? What's going
I,
on here?
I think it is, it's both, I think, a little bit of concern and also recognizing that, we had this educational system going on for ages with minor changes here and there. And even though, the whole system in a way has been become like dumping ground, data dump. And I think the COVID has really helped to probably shift the whole educational system along with economic system, other system, uh, very drastically. I mean, we couldn't do it, I mean, whatever we have been doing with technology and stuff like that, it was really incremental. But the COVID brought in, like, can be incremental. You have to adapt. You have to, the COVID brought the whole disruption in everything,
Right.
disruption in your economic life, family life, whatever you name it, it is. And big one is the environment.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And um, as much as we complain about it, there's so much positive about it. I was just thinking earlier, you know, somebody said to, a friend of mine said, it seems like every day is a groundhog day now.
Yes.
And my question is it really a groundhog day now? Or have we been living in a groundhog day all along, but we were so numb to it with all the distraction that we never even figured out that it was a groundhog day? Because there were so many distractions that it seemed like we were running, or like the chicken with the head cut off,
Yes.
and not even recognizing that is what is happening, and that's how we are living. And COVID has brought in the pause in everything. And a big one for me is the pause for us to connect with who we are, with our own self. Because if we are connected, and if we recognize what is our purpose of being here, I think, and I feel really quite strongly about this, that a lot of the problem that we have in the world could be resolved or seen differently from the place of collaboration, connection, and really coming up with solutions together with greater consciousness, so that whatever solutions we come up with, it's not made by the top 5 or 10%,
Right.
but is created from bottom up, wherein, we think we know what is best for others,
Right.
but far from the truth. you know how do this top 5% or 10% knows what is best for people at the bottom of the ladder, you know.
Right.
And so this is a really interesting time, and actually I'm seeing the whole COVID thing as in a positive light. Yes, we have social or physical distancing, and physical distancing is one thing, but the social distancing was already happening before the COVID.
Right. Yes, it was.
Take,
I'm with you
take,
100%.
take an example. Family goes out to be together, eat at the restaurant, enjoy this meal, and they are sitting. And how many, even the parent, everybody on their cell phone.
Yes.
So that is for me is social distancing, not the physical distancing. And now I feel we are more connecting, we are sharing information, we are sharing our stories. Yeah, so that is a big plus for me, and the big disruption in the educational system, so that we look at it and we change what need to be changed, rather than to bring the old educational system, and even though it might not be working for a lot of kids, try to make the kids fit the educational system rather than creating the system that would really meet the needs of every individual child.
Right. I think the same can be said for the healthcare industry too. I think there's a huge disruption in the healthcare industry, and
Hmm.
the disparities have been amplified dramatically, racially, socioeconomically. It's a
Absolutely.
very interesting, scary, and uncertain time. But I agree that, and I said this morning, even though I know people who have been sick, my niece had it, and it's a very, very scary thing. I know of some people who have died from it,
Hmm.
and that, it's a horrible, horrible thing. I do believe out of tragedy and out of trauma, there are positives that result, and it's up to, individuals to really work together, like you were talking about, bringing people together and making those connections.
Right.
It's up to all of us to work together now that we see the problems so clearly. It's up to everyone to work together to find solutions to make things better and to prevent
Absolutely.
tragedies like this in the future as much as we can. I don't know if we can
Exactly.
prevent
Yeah.
pandemics, but we certainly can have a much better response based on what we
Absolutely.
learn.
I totally agree. Yeah. Yeah. This, I mean, what as the saying goes, what you focus on grows. But if you're going to look at the COVID as the negative and not see in the holistic manner what also has happened, then of course it seems like doom and gloom.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And that also I think has created a greater consciousness, because even the latest thing, that the whole racial unrest,
Yes.
I was wondering if it would have touched us as much if the life was normal as before, because it's not that the or whatever the incident that has happened lately has not happened in the past.
Right.
Everybody went about their lives doing whatever and not getting involved.
I agree with you. I think there were so many people at home and watching the news and seeing the tragedy with George Floyd over and over, but then all of the other footage that then was compiled to amplify this is a problem. And because so many people are out of work,
Hmm.
there's almost, even though the pandemic is taking up a lot of oxygen in the room, it's like that, then people were able to focus on that.
Yeah.
I think that I agree with you on that.
Right.
It may, because of the pandemic, it has greater visibility and more people are aware. And I think we all feel at times, at least everyone I've talked to, feel helpless in the current situation in many ways. But to be able to protest, to be able to speak out, to be able to take action against something that, is clearly wrong, to help move change forward.
Right, right. And even though we're talking about pandemic and this whole racial stuff coming up, and I was also thinking as you were talking, the whole physical distancing
Mm-hmm.
and the demonstration or the COVID did not stop from people participating in those demonstration, because one of the demonstration that we went, I think there were about at least 5,000 people.
Right, right. And that's the thing. People recognize that, you know, people who have black skin, people who are basically not white, are at risk every day of being killed by the police at a much higher rate than people who are white. And so people of all races have been willing to put their own lives at risk to make a statement about
Yes,
how wrong that is. And that's, I mean, yes, in the middle of a pandemic,
yes, yes.
it's
I mean,
powerful.
yeah, because when I went for this demonstration where there were so many people, it was not just black people. Probably there were people of other races, a lot more other people of other races compared to just blacks.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so with the whole racial situation, um, one of my questions for you is where did you grow up? Where are you from, and how does your experience in that country compare to your experience here in the US?
Oh, yeah. I grew up in India, and you know, uh, I guess we being having grown up in India, there were, or I should say, different experience, because it, at least to me, it probably was more to do with religion, and you know I didn't experience anything about caste personally, but which does not mean it didn't exist in India. It did. But where I come from, that was not the big deal for us.
Hmm.
But uh, at another level, I grew up having neighbors who were Hindus,
Hmm.
and we were Catholics, and we grew up together. We socialized together, and we also, I think, sort of, we knew our own identities, you know, which was not hidden or anything, which was right there, even as kids. It was nothing sugar coated. You know, they, even my friends, as little as we were, when we had fights, they would say, you Catholic or you Christian, do this, and similarly, I would not sugarcoat it and say, nicely. I would say, you Hindus do them. Like one of the big thing was, they would say, you Christian, you all eat all meat, and you all eat all of that. And I would say to them, yeah, you guys eat grass, because they were vegetarian.
Yeah,
And so,
that's funny.
and at that point of time, I didn't realize, which I realize now, the importance of respecting all life. So when it was almost considered like for me to eat meat, there's
Hmm.
no big deal. And looking down upon them, and similarly they looking down upon me. And so it was more in the open. It was not sugar coated. It was not covered under, you know, political correctness.
Right. And so, what is it like? And when did you come to the U.S. and what's it been like here?
I think I've been, I would say about almost 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So whatever my experience about India has been before, before the 25 years.
Right.
And so, yeah, I go to India, occasionally, but I have probably been to at least 30 plus countries,
Right.
just because of work. So it's not that my experience is just being in India and then just being in US.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, share a little bit about what you've seen. I'm really curious. I have been able to travel a little bit, but not all over the world like you have. So, share what you've seen about people.
I think one of my observation, when I was in Brazil,
Hmm.
and this was like way back in 2000, you know, and we were there, and one of the big observation for me was, that I felt that it was not very, maybe where I was. So maybe I'm using the same stroke for all of Brazil, which might not be. Uh, but where I was in Brazil, I saw there were like intermarriages, or the black and white, whether they married or have children, or whether they were just partners. It was a lot more that I saw versus being in US. I did not see as much as I saw in those intermarriages or biracial things, and this was in 2000. Things are changing now a whole lot, and so that stood out for me, and I even commented on that, like how in US we are black and white.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that doesn't go to say it's not changing. It is changing, but at a very slow pace.
Hmm.
And perhaps that also then that creates some sort of it's not, maybe not intentional, but it creates some sort of separation between the two.
Yeah.
And then you don't have much of the understanding what the other might be feeling and what the other might be going.
Hmm.
Because I know I have friends on both sides, and one of the thing that comment that I see that is being made is, and I've heard too, saying, Black Life Matters,
Hmm.
and the other side feels like, what about our lives? All lives matters. But that's why I feel like, yes, definitely all lives matters. But right now, the focus is, or where they feel probably pushed in the corner, and they want to, and where, of course, there are more instances of black people being arrested, and even whole thing, about the police um, searching, even the cars. And there is some data that says the blacks, the car, when they are stopped, their cars are searched much more than the whites, or they are pulled for minor things where you shouldn't even, if your uh, tail light is broken or something,
Right.
you don't have to do that, and it's almost like you want an excuse to do that,
Right.
and so there is quite a bit of that type of discrimination,
Yeah.
and so yeah, all lives matters, no doubt about it, but how can we not have a separation, but how can we join together to bring that oneness?
Right. Right. And like you say, the rate of police stopping people of color, killing people of color is more than double what it is for
Yeah,
white
yeah.
people. So I, yeah, I think what's going on right now also raises awareness. It sort of takes me back to the education system, and with all of the racial issues and with the Confederate statues, and I just
Hmm.
think that our school system has really failed our citizens. uh,
Yeah.
Not because the teachers aren't dedicated and great, not because of any particular individual, but because the system itself has been structured in a way to teach one way. And we're all incredibly diverse, and the messages to American students has really been very, very, very narrow. When I took history classes, all I learned about were older white men. That's all that was in my history book. You know,
Right.
in order to learn about women who had made contributions and invented things, in order to learn about people of color who had made contributions to our society, and to really understand slavery and the repercussions and the systems that have been in place since slavery ended. I had
Hmm.
to learn that on my own. I didn't learn that in school. And that's a failure of our education system, I believe. But it's
Right.
also because typically we've had white men in charge. And so the people in power are telling the narrative that they want the citizens of our country to know and to believe. And so that is also a failure, that not enough people are voting to have people in office that are diverse, that can make these changes and that can help provide a better education to our citizens. That so that's what I believe.
Yeah, yeah, and even one of the statement, let's make America great, and that's such ignorance, right? How can you make America great? If we could really make America great, we could have made America great and stop the COVID from entering America, right? So, I mean, how can you make the America or any one country great without the other, with all this globalization? So it's a little bit backwardness, even though we are considered a developed country, and have so much resources and have so much talent, and yet, we are, I don't know, there's something is missing here, how, yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. It's, and the make America great phrase is, something from the 70s that was used at a time of, difficult economic times. But also, it wasn't that long after the civil rights protests
Yeah,
and
exactly.
MLK being killed. And so it creates this idea that we want to go, that we, not me, but we as, those following
Exactly.
Trump, want to go back to a time that was way more unequal than it is today.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly we are trying to uh, hold on to the system that does not work no more.
Yeah. And
You
why?
know,
It doesn't work. Why should
yeah,
we keep using
uh, way back before, probably there was less of globalization in the sense, people there was not that mobility as much as it's today, right?
it? Right, right.
And now, with this and making America great, how do we make America great when we have so much racial issues and all our educational systems, all our systems, our policies that does not support the collective?
Exactly. And there are more people living in homelessness, and there's, the economic divide is getting wider and wider. And with the pandemic, there have been all these interruptions in manufacturing and delivery of goods. So it's, yeah, the system is completely broken and needs an overhaul.
Yeah, and it was also little bit going back, and this is nothing to bash the police force,
Mhm,
but it is more like how our system works.
mhm.
Like if the police comes to my house and knocks on my door and they want to search my house, I will ask for search warrant, right? But if when you are stopped on the road and they want to search your car, what's the difference?
Right.
And they never tell you that you have the right not to allow them. You have the right to the attorney, and especially young people, and especially if they're blacks, you know, I mean, they're freaking out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you think, well, it's the police, so I have to do what they say. But there are laws
Exactly.
in place, but we don't know what the laws are, and we're not informed. And
Exactly.
police can completely lie. They can completely lie to individuals to
And
have them do what they want them to do.
fortunately, they can't do it anymore because they are caught on the camera.
I know, that's the good thing. Yeah, and I'm with you. I think there is a need for police. I I appreciate, and I'm glad that we have a police force. But and I think maybe the terminology of defund the police is maybe not the best way to phrase the movement, which is really about putting funds where they're most needed, where they can be most
Exactly.
effective. Don't We're
Exactly.
not saying get rid of the police. We need the police force for specific
Yeah.
purposes, but they don't need to be dealing with mental health issues, and they don't need to be showing up every single time there's
Exactly.
an incident.
Yeah. And I think it is, everything boils down to systemic issue,
Yeah,
and how can we, because this police, they're doing their job with what they know and what they have.
right, right,
And if we provide them funding, provide them with a proper education, because you have to take care of them too.
right,
And if
right,
they're working long hours, they probably at the end of their rope, and that it is really easy when you have been working for long hours to just break it
lose
down,
that temper. Yeah,
you
that's
know
well, and there was and I can't remember where it was, but there was a news story on a police force, and I'm thinking it was a county in Florida, but I could be wrong. I can't remember. And they have very few incidents of, um, you know, shootings that are questionable. their ratio of stopping people and charging people for crimes, and is very equal to the racial population. And there was an interview with the police chief who said that the first thing they do when they hire new officers is give them an education about our history, and an understanding of slavery, an understanding of where we come from as a people. And that's a critical component for people to be able to make good decisions, to have an understanding.
Right.
Just to have that basic understanding is really
Right.
important.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
yeah, I'm thinking we need education at every level. And, it's not so much the education that you get in school, but more from that place of consciousness, mindfulness, really preparing them, you know, how to deal with different scenarios, how to deal with this different situation,
right,
because the force is not the way to go.
right, right. And unfortunately, I think there are a lot of children growing up without that type of guidance in their homes. And when we also have an education system that's so focused on testing in
Mhm.
particular very narrow areas, we're not providing the kind of societal supports that are needed for healthy, happy individuals to grow and become model citizens and help one another. And
Exactly. I mean, I'm also thinking like the whole system is also okay. If you didn't do well in your exam, you fail, right? So
right.
it's another way to look at reward and punishment.
Yeah, yeah,
And so the same thing, everywhere reward and punishment. So what is the message that we are sending out? That only, our morals are like, oh, we have really taken that seat where we are judging good and bad, but there is more than good and bad.
right, right. It's a whole gray area, right?
Exactly. Even in school,
Yeah,
we will, if a child is acting up, we immediately label as a trouble kid, right?
right,
How much time do we take to understand the child? And of course, they're going to say that, a teacher with 30 kids or 34 kids is not, can do that.
right.
But still, you have other resources. Can we use those resources to address that, rather than to, because the moment we give that label, the child takes that label as theirs, and then it's like self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. Yeah, and this is where if we were able to take funds from the police department where you have trouble, we have police officers in schools, and children are being arrested for things that they really need uh, counseling. They need mental health help. They
Yeah.
don't need a police officer throwing them in jail, putting them in juvenile detention to go on to have a life of crime, because like you say, it's a you're a bad kid.
Hmm.
And so, how many kids that are labeled as bad kids grow up to have, good lives and, successful career in whatever that may be. And that's another of my pet peeves, is how people define success. I don't define
Hmm.
success based on the amount of money someone makes, but I know a lot of people do. And to me, success is having a happy, stable
Hmm.
home and family and community of friends, and
Right.
that is successful living in my mind.
Right.
But that's that
Yeah.
that societal view of good and bad, and socioeconomics, and
Hmm.
who deserves good things and who doesn't.
And often we will say, oh, I worked hard in school and I got good grades and I put in hard work, so it's okay for me to be earning. You didn't do any of that. So but we only look at that part of it.
Right.
What was the other part that surrounded this kid who was not able to get through even high school?
Right. Right.
Because if we ask that question, then we have to work hard, right, to help them. So we just want to make the other side bad and say, I worked hard, so I deserve this.
Yeah.
What if this other person had the same opportunities that I had? Wouldn't they be where same place where I am? And then cutting down on the funding to school system is further deteriorating everything.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. So there
well,
we go.
like I know. So let me ask you another question. You're from India and you're living in the US at a time where I think open racism is more prevalent than I've ever witnessed in my lifetime. And I was born in the 60s. Have you yourself experienced racism?
Mm, I would not, maybe the way looked at it is different, maybe, because, I don't, even though I'm part of the color,
Hmm.
I don't belong this side nor the other side. I'm like in the middle, so, and
You're in the gray zone.
I'm in the gray zone, absolutely gray zone. And I think I never looked at it as racism as much as maybe ignorance or insensitivity
Yeah.
to different cultures. And the insensitivity came, or as much as it stood out for me way back, in 2000 maybe. But it was also, to me, it was ignorance, because I felt lack of education in a way, in a broader sense. It's not academic
I
education.
understand. Yeah.
And because I think one looked at my skin color and they just lumped me with whether it was, after 9/11, it was with Afghanistan or any of these Middle East countries, just based on my skin color,
Yeah.
without even knowing that there is a difference. And all these countries are so different and have their own culture, have their own socializing pattern and everything else,
Yeah.
and that's why I said, it is ignorance more than and insensitivity, because I think the insensitive part came up for me more because uh, there is I think things have changed now. There was like lack of respect for other cultures. They were almost, you made fun of your culture, and even like, oh, like some of the Indians still wore the Indian clothes, almost like to say, oh, I could never do that. How they can wrap this big thing around them. I mean, it is their dress, it's not something big thing. And that's a little bit of insensitivity and disrespectfulness.
Yes.
And even to the extent, the food, they would yeah, different food has different names, and they would make fun of it and not
Mhm.
even recognize when you're making fun and laughing and making everybody laugh, how that is impacting the person from that culture.
Right, right. And what about with your accent? Do you get,
Definitely. I mean, I lived in Chicago, and we had absolute no problem with the my accent.
mhm,
When we moved to North Carolina, it was like, oh, you know, I even heard a person say, I have such difficulty understanding you. And when I said, oh, it's mutual. And their jaws fell, like, huh? Like as if that was like international, the best accent that was there, and not even thinking that it is nonetheless it is also a different accent.
mhm.
where
Yeah,
i where I stand, it is a different accent.
of
But
course.
and taking things for granted, and I think maybe here also that insensitivity, ignorance comes in, taking yourself, taking others for granted, that what I speak, you should understand, and you have no issues with that. But with your accent, I have issue and I don't understand you.
Right. Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
you know. So yeah, so I think now I feel probably there's a lot more openness to that. I think that is one blessing of globalization, because you could not stay, probably even till 2000 we were still in a bubble.
Oh, I
And
think
that
there's still a lot of people living in their own little bubbles. But
even
but
yeah,
yes, I think there are many more opportunities to interact with people of other
absolutely.
ethnicities, other
Hmm.
beliefs, other races, other economic levels. At least
Right.
those people like me, like you, like our board members, like the people that are involved with our organization are all very interested in other cultures and want to get to know people and learn from one another. And but I know that, I mean, I don't think we would have as many uh, Trump supporters, honestly, if we didn't have so many people living in their own little bubbles, because I think that group of people is living in a bubble.
Or choosing to live in the bubble
Yes,
and pretending that that nothing else exists.
right, right. And I probably need to edit that out because I shouldn't be talking about Trump as the executive director of a nonprofit that's really not supposed to take any sort of political stance. So
Yeah, you
I'll
can take that out.
I'll edit that out. Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
hard though. It's hard not to say things. Oh.
I mean, that is where we are human, and I think more and more we have to have compassion for ourselves so that authentically we can extend that to others.
That's a really good point. You're right. Yeah. Well, what message would you share with other people? You right now, this is a platform for you to share your thoughts and express what's going on with you personally, but also to just share whatever message or messages you would like to share.
I think the message that I feel very strongly is we have to go back to our basics. And when I say go back to the basics, it's like really creating communities. And, this probably was true for America too. In India, they used to say, it takes a whole village to raise a child. And that was very true growing up. Uh, anyone, any of us kids were fighting, or anybody from outside got in, and it was never considered that, oh, it's not my issue. The
Hmm.
other parents or whoever, they got in the middle of it, and they were ready to check out what is going on.
Yeah.
And similarly, when the child was misbehaving or somewhere in public, they didn't say, "Oh, it's not my problem." They would correct us. And it was like having several parents everywhere. And probably, and because we all knew each other, so we didn't take offense at that. And probably it was same in US, that everybody knew each other in those olden days, you know and lived as a community.
Hmm.
And I think that is we have my message would be like, we wherever we are, let's create small communities, because that is the way we can expand. Because if I say we need to create communities, each individual of us can say, oh, that's not my job, it is everyone's job. We can create communities where we work, where if it is at the school, or if even among children, they can create by really not seeing the other as different, but seeing what is common to us, and not going by the our skin color, but something much deeper in each one of us. And the love is the only glue that can hold us together. And the starting point is really seeing the other as part of my extension, my own community, with its the neighbor. And I am blessed to live in a nice neighborhood where we our neighborhood will have, like, on Friday evening, and their front yard, they will put the screen, and for the neighbors, come and sit on the lawn and watch the movie there. Or we will have some sort of get together, and it feels really nice. It feels like I enjoy being here. It is so nourishing, and it's almost taking care of the whole person, even though we might be different colors, different whatever they might say, because deep down we are more similar than different. But we are just focusing on the exterior, and then we are putting this big barrier which keeps us separate. It doesn't keep us safe, it just keeps us separate. And then, no safety is created, it's all artificial. It's only when we are living as community and seeing the other as an extension of me, I think more we can bring that community feeling and the understanding, and really being open to each other's perspective, rather than saying my perspective is the right one. So that's their whole engagement piece. And that's where, even if we have different perspective, how can we really listen to each other's perspective, and respect each other? We if we are not willing to listen, the respect does not come, because there is respect in you listening to a different viewpoint, rather than labeling, oh, that it does not work for me. And if it does not work for you, we have to remember it doesn't work for the other person too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they're willing to engage, and how can we keep this engagement going and create the community that we so desire, and we so really looking for. Yeah.
That we need so much, especially now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I was even saying, for me, it is a lot to do partnering, and I have been partnering up with people,
Mhm.
even in terms of work. And partnering up is more being collaborative, bringing our differences and saying where we can partner up, what can we create together, what we can create together we cannot create individually. It's the individualism only separates us.
Yeah, I feel the same way. That's what I thrive on is that collaboration and finding other people and organizations to work with to reach a goal that we can't reach on our own or that it would take us much longer time to reach on our own. So it's
Exactly,
a win-win.
exactly, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well,
And
that's wonderful.
yeah, thank you. And anything else, Leah? I really appreciate you doing this.
Oh, I thank you so much for participating. I have enjoyed learning more about you and your views. And yeah, we'll keep sharing our messages and do what we can,
Absolutely.
as
Yeah.
individuals and as an organization to try to make improvement. So thank
Yeah.
you so much for your time.
I also wanted to say one more thing, Leah, that I appreciate you really for the work that you do,
Thank you.
and especially during this time because it is difficult to for older people, even in the retirement home, to be by themselves, or and so much loneliness there could be. But you are being so creative in coming up with what is the best way with the given situation, how can you serve them the best, and using the technology and bringing them together and going on this journey. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. The technology is a challenge, but we're getting there. So
Yeah,
thank you. It has been a very important learning experience, and
I bet.
yeah, but it's been good, and we've made many new connections because of it. So
Yeah.
we'll keep plugging along.
And even though as much as difficult it is, it probably is quite satisfying too, right?
It is. It is, and I have to say, it's been so meaningful to have board members like you and our other board members who are there to participate in the programs and to even just saying the things you've just said, makes me tear up. I value having such a wonderful board of directors, such a diverse board of directors who sees the vision and wants to support me and the others involved in helping us achieve that vision. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I know how hard you have been working and trying to hold the several different balls in one hand, two hands, and keep them going, and having some in the air
Yeah.
and not letting them drop. And yeah.
Well, it's I think it's part of running a nonprofit. I can't literally juggle, but you learn how to juggle many, many things in order to be successful. So, but with the pandemic, I mean, initially it was really scary, and it did cross my mind. We should just close our doors. How are we ever going to survive this? I mean,
Mhm,
and it wasn't just at the beginning. It's happened, a few times throughout these past few months. But when I think about the older adults that we have worked with in person and the communities that assisted livings and long-term cares that we've worked with, I I couldn't imagine not continuing to provide these opportunities that bring people together even virtually
mhm,
around these common interests. And so to me, it really, and I filled in on Monday. I had a teaching artist who had to be out, and I did a class on Monday. And that was just the best thing in the world, teaching that class and
Mm.
interacting with the residents at a CCRC close by. And I mean, I just think one day if I'm lucky enough to get old enough and I need to live, in a community setting, I will die if I don't have those opportunities to be creative.
Yeah.
And so it's critical. I mean, it's a
Yep.
critical part of my life so I can understand how critical it is for other people.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much. And you stay safe. Tell your husband I said hello.
I will. And you too.
All right. Thanks. I'll
Uh-huh.
talk to you soon.
Right.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.
You too.